All right, boys, let us now turn our attention to the Bellator versus Rizin 2 card that went down. Let me pull this bitch up. Oh, where did it go? I just had it here. Let me pull it up again real quick. Mark, say things.
I remember the days when you were prepared on this show. That's what I'll say. Used to run this thing like a well-oiled machine.
God damn.
Now we're just lost at sea.
It's the delay.
Rudderless.
The delay has thrown me off so much. All right. In a fun, like a double-header day, Bellator versus Rizin 2 went down in Japan at the Saitama Super Arena. And let's kick this thing off with the main event. Patricky Pitbull defeated Roberto de Souza by TKO via leg kicks in round number 3. Mark, start us off. Give us your take and your impressions of Pitbull getting it done in the main event.
I have to say, I truly didn't think Patricky Pitbull could get that done. And I know de Souza doesn't have a ton of wins against established top-tier fighters either, but I thought he was good enough to beat Pitbull regardless. Now, 4 days' notice is certainly something that could have been a factor here, but you can only go off the fight we got, and I didn't love the way de Souza fought it. He was very comfortable standing and waiting to counter and exchanging on the feet, and that's where Patricky lives. So I think there should have been way more urgency from de Souza to create contact. It didn't even have to be takedowns. It could be clinches. It could be guard pulls, anything. I don't think he made Patricky think nearly enough about the threats that he brings into the cage. I don't think he ever made Patricky feel that fear of like, fuck, I can't let him get a hold of me. It just didn't seem like it was part of the fight. And because of that, Patricky got to work, and he did a great job dictating the exchanges. He did stuff a couple takedowns. I don't want to say he didn't. He lands the great flying knee late in round 2, and then he ends things with a calf kick KO. And you love to see a finish like that. It's not even as if he had invested so much in that leg. It was just a perfect, devastating calf kick, and de Souza went down. So a really big win for Patricky Pitbull. Legitimized him somewhat in my eyes as a guy I always kind of questioned. Again, it's not like de Souza's the most proven guy in the world, but I was impressed with this win, and he will go on now to face Alexander Shabliy in the semis, and if he could get past him, he'll have a shot to get his title back in the final.
Omar?
Yeah. I didn't think Patricio would be able to finish this fight. Patricky, I'm sorry. I didn't think he'd be able to finish this fight, but he did. And I thought he looked fantastic. I thought at the end of that second round, the flying knee that ended up knocking down de Souza, I mean, I think under normal circumstances, if it wasn't somebody who was such a threat on the ground, I think Patricky would have been a little bit more apt to continue to like push forward and finish him and follow him down on the ground and stuff like that. But I do think there was still caution throughout that fight. I think de Souza suffers from a lot of the problems that a lot of really high-level jiu-jitsu guys have, which is they're not great at wrestling takedowns. They're good at BJJ takedowns of sorts, but that generally doesn't work against somebody who knows how to stuff takedowns, both wrestling and BJJ takedowns alike. And de Souza was not really like... I didn't actually ever think that de Souza was going to get a legit takedown on Patricky. I figured if anything he would pull guard, and I think he tried to do that at least once, and it didn't work for him either. And I think a lot of that just really deterred him from continuing to find that avenue. I'm sure there was a lot of expended energy trying to do that stuff, so I think it put him in a really awkward position the longer the fight went on, because I think he started to see his tools were just not working the way I think he wanted them to work. And I think it started to mess with his mindset. And I think for Patricky, I don't think enough things deterred him in that fight for him to become uncomfortable, and so he just kept pushing forward, kept doing damage, kept doing basically what he wanted to do until he leg kicked him to hell. So great performance from Patricky, man. I figured he'd win that fight, but he did that fight even better than I thought he was going to.
Yeah, man. Right. Anything you guys want to say about what's next for Pitbull?
Well, we know he's going to the semis. He's going to fight Alexander Shabley. But we don't have to. I don't think we have to match up these Bellators. We got a lot to get to still.
This is true. Okay, co-main event: Kyoji Horiguchi went up against Makoto Shinryu, and it ended in a no contest because under a minute, well under a minute, it ended in an eye poke, and it was a no contest. So, what do you guys want to say about that?
Dog. I mean, there's not much to say, dude. There was nothing happened. It was literally the first exchange of the fight, and Horiguchi's either his index finger or his middle finger went right into homeboy's eye. I thought it swelled up almost immediately, but maybe that was just the way his dude's face is. But it was rough. It was a rough eye poke. I feel like we've seen people react worse to eye pokes than he did, but I'm also not the type of person. And I think, Mark, after you've gotten eye poked recently, I think you might be in the same boat as me where I'm just I'm not really ready to give people shit when they get poked in the eye, because not only does it hurt like a motherfucker and take a little while for it to clear up, but you sometimes legitimately see multiple things like double vision quite often when that happens. So, I don't want to give him too much shit, but I had to notice that we've seen dudes react a lot worse to eye pokes and continue fighting. Yeah. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but it just made this one seem, I guess, less of a problem as other ones that we have seen. That's all.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. At first, the way he was reacting, I was like, all right, this sucks. But then as it kept going, I was like, wait a second, is this fight not going to go on? It just didn't seem like that's what it was going to be until we got there. And it was like, oh, fuck. So, I mean, I agree, though. I don't question guys' reaction to eye pokes. I try my best not to do that, at least. But this sucked so much. I was so ready to see Kyoji get a belt. Shinryu had a hype entrance with the mask and all. I was ready to go, and we did not get very far. Basically, the first exchange, as you said, and it was all over. So it sucks. You wonder if they'll ever run it back with the future of Bellator up in the air. Maybe this just doesn't happen, but we shall see.
Okay, Mark, staying with you, give us your impressions of Watanabe unanimous decision over Arteaga. Or Arteaga.
So this was a controversial fight on Twitter and everywhere else. Round one was a really competitive round. Commentary made it sound like Arteaga clearly won. I disagreed. I had Kana ahead early. Then, yes, Arteaga had a great portion of the round where she started landing some big shots, snapped Kana's head back, and I thought she did pull ahead in that sequence. But then Kana gets the late takedown and lands some solid shots. In the last 15 seconds, she lands 7-8 hard shots to the head. So to me, it was enough to take the round back, and I had Watanabe up after one. Then round two, it wasn't a great round for Watanabe by any means, but I didn't think Arteaga got anything done really in that round. So for me, it was Kana again, and I had her up 2-0. And then the third was definitely Arteaga's round. But I saw a lot of people saying Veta won. I saw a lot of people saying even that she won 30-27. And I agree it was no great performance from Kana, but I actually think she did enough to get the W. I think rounds 1 and 2 were hers.
Omar?
I wasn't a fan of the commentary. I will say that, because by the end of that fight, if you listen to the commentary, Arteaga had completely destroyed Kana.
Yeah, I agree.
It was that her name, Kana? Yes, Kana,
yeah.
Watanabe. I wasn't a huge fan of the commentary. I did, however, throughout the entirety of the fight, thought that Arteaga landed much cleaner, much bigger shots, did significantly more damage overall throughout the entirety of that fight. I think the main thing that Kana brought to the table past the first round was only grappling. and grappling that, frankly, I didn't think was very effective. There was a lot of work on the cage. There was a lot of work to try and take her down, but at no point did she ever really like have complete control of her where I thought Arteaga was at a real disadvantage. I thought even in moments where Arteaga was fighting off the takedown, she was still landing shots here and there. I just thought she was a bit busier in a lot of these certain situations throughout the fight. And you could really say this for 1, 2, or 3. The fight never really changed that momentum. I thought it was a very competitive fight throughout. I don't think it was a blowout from Arteaga, but I do think that Arteaga landed throughout the fight the bigger and the heavier shots and did more damage overall. So that was why I gave Arteaga the fight. I thought she had 1, 2, and 3, just doing it individually, not really trying to look at it as a whole fight. If you tell me that Kana got round 1, especially because of that late takedown and the flurry at the end, I'm not going to argue with it. 2 and 3, though, I thought Arteaga had, in my opinion.
All right. Let's move on to...
Sounds as controversial as it is for everyone else.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think I got this one right. Magomedov, round 1, submission over Danny Sabatello. Yeah. Mark, give us your take of how this fight played out.
You did, man. It was encouraging signs for Sabatello early. He successfully shot from what looked like it was way too far away, and he got it. He got the back. He lifted Magomedov up for a mat return. It looked like we were settling in for another wrestling exhibition from Danny Sabatello. And he was winning all the transitions and scrambles, which is what I thought was going to be a key for why he would win this fight. And he was winning them until he put his head into a guillotine. And he did fight out of the first one, but he kind of ended up fighting out only to slip his head right into one on the other side. And even in it, it honestly looked like he might have been okay. Like, I was looking at it and I was like, oh, I think he's right in there. And he wasn't. So taps, great job from Magomedov to weather the early pressure from Danny, keep scrambling, find an opening that let him secure a really big win. And he gets it, and he stays relevant kind of just outside of this title picture in Bellator now.
I always find it interesting when I pick against a Magomedov, and I'm like, I wonder how this is going to go. and you know, picking a Magomedov to get out-wrestled, I thought, in the end, sort of like the Derek Lewis fight, it's fucking dumb. It was a bad decision. It wasn't great. And Danny Sabatello had his moments early. I mean, there was one sequence where he like picked him up and dropped him on his ass, and you know, looking like he kind of was going to have him in trouble, and worked towards his back and wrestled him. I mean, it was definitely a wrestling match at that point for quite some time. But Magomedov found his groove, man, and I think he even said, he's like, we wrestle all the time. Like, whatever you're trying to do in here is cool, but I'm always wrestling. So it's, you know, and it looked like it. It looked like something where he was at no point was he panicking. At no point did he really seem like he was unable to answer whatever it was that Danny Sabatello had for him. And Danny Sabatello got caught, man. They were still dry, right? There was no sweat to really to slide off of, and everything that Danny Sabatello tried to do to get out of that guillotine was not working. And he got caught. First submission loss of his career, if I'm understanding that right. And it was a big spot for Magomedov to be in. So good for him.
All right. Andrey Koreshkov, split decision victory over Lorenz Larkin. Omar, give us your take.
Man, this fight was rough. I don't even really know how I scored this fight. I'm going to be completely honest with you. It was a very, very tough fight to score. I felt like Koreshkov had a lot more of the control. I also thought he had a little bit more of the stand-up in certain situations. I thought the further the fight went on, I thought the more that Lorenz kind of found his timing and found his groove. But it sort of got into this. I thought Koreshkov had it early, second round kind of here and there, and then I thought Lorenz had the third round. But it was a close, very close fight, probably just as close as their first fight. I think the first fight was also a split decision, right?
Yep, other way. Yep.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's it's rough to watch them fight because it's a very difficult. That's one of those fights that as a judge I would hate to have to do because it was very difficult watching that fight to try to figure out who really won it because it was close, super close.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the firefight I hoped it would be. There was a lot of grinding and wrestling attempts from Koreshkov. He had a great first round. He managed the range really well. He ripped the leg of Lorenz, and he mixed in that takedown late. So it was a nice opening round for him. He definitely took that one. Round 2 is the swing round and the round where there's some debate, but I think Koreshkov got it. I think he did enough. He did well in the early striking exchanges, and then as soon as Lorenz had any success in them, he just clinched Lorenz up and kind of stalled him out. So I thought he won it. It wasn't, the most entertaining strategy ever from him, but he was nullifying Lorenz a lot, and I think it's kind of tough to give that fight to anyone other than Koreshkov. He did get really tired, and in the third, I think it certainly went Lorenz's way. It makes you wonder what would happen if that's a 5-round fight, but it's not, and Koreshkov does enough to get it done, and he avenges the split decision loss with a split decision win, so I guess they'll have to fight again at some point.
All right. Last one. Let's touch on the results from Super Rizin, including Patricio getting knocked out. Mark?
Yeah, so I'll just say very briefly, things of note. Tofik Musayev got back to his knockouting ways. He knocked out Akira Okada in the second round. Juan Archuleta got himself a Rizin bantamweight belt. He won a decision over Hiromasa Ogikubo, as we figured he probably would. So well done. That's a pretty cool accomplishment for him to add to the resume. And then the big one, freaking this weird scenario where Patricio Pitbull is over there with his brother Patricky, and I don't know if it was related to AJ McKee falling off or not, but they were like, you know what, maybe we need a little star power on this card, and apparently he had been saying he'd like to fight if they had something for him, and they booked this fight against Chihiro Suzuki, who is a credentialed kickboxer. He was 10-3, I believe, in MMA coming into this fight. And they book it on whatever it was, 4 days' notice, and he fucking knocks out Pitbull. So it's got to be the upset of the year at this point, I would imagine. I'm not sure what the betting odds were, but, I mean, it's in the running for certain. And he knocked him out beautifully and clean. So a wild result that I don't think anyone saw coming. I feel like it's not getting talked about that much because it was kind of buried on this random Super Rizin card that wasn't part of the Bellator broadcast, and maybe not that many people saw it. But, like, Patricio Pitbull just lost 2 fights in a row, and one of them he got knocked the fuck out. It's pretty crazy.
It was weird that Patricio Pitbull was fighting, like, on the intermission portion of this card.
Yeah, I think it's because it was this weird late ad where he wasn't supposed to be on the card, and I guess the Bellator portion of the card was full, and they were like, all right, we'll put you over here. And, yeah,
Strange.
things did not go well.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know anything about Suzuki like that. And to be honest, watching that fight, watching that performance, like, I don't want to. I feel like you guys, the day I came off, or the day I was off sick, you guys were talking about how you guys don't really like to shit on fighters, and I know Mike was talking about how he might meet certain people, so he doesn't want to be completely disrespectful. And both of you were like, Omar shits on him, though. Fuck him. He doesn't care. So I don't want to shit on him because he did something that people don't generally do to Patricio Pitbull. So I don't want to shit on him. But from a technique standpoint, like watching that fight just became a barn brawl. Like it didn't even really get to a really technical point. And Patricio Pitbull played a game where he flipped a coin and he lost that coin flip. Yeah, so it's difficult for me to take too much away from the fight from the Suzuki side as to how good he is, because if I took away Pitbull from that equation and just watched his movement and his technique and things like that, like I still think Patricio is a better fighter, but he fucked around and he found out. I'll tell you that.
No, I think that's a great take. like if you ask me right now, do I think that Suzuki is a top 10 level featherweight in the world? I definitely don't. I mean, maybe we're going to find out he is, but I didn't get that from that performance. I think he just happened to fucking catch him.
Yeah, and good for him. I mean, that's still a tall order to do that.
Oh God, yeah.
So good for him. But again, from a totality standpoint, I still think that Patricio is just overall a better fighter.
Yeah, if anybody ever made trivia questions about our show, and the question came up of like, who talks the most shit, it would be Omar.
Weird weekend for the Pitbull brothers. Like, Patricky's got to be like, dude, I fucking got it done. I beat Roberto de Souza. Why are you fucking this up and getting knocked out? Like, we should be celebrating right now.
Totally.